Are
It
you
was on
entering
a
the raffle
sun-washed
later, Peggy?
Saturday in
I
late
hadn't
June
thought
that
about
the
it,
St.
Arthur.
Aldwyn Garden Society held its
Look
annual
at those
fete.
dahlias.
The cheerful affair of sponge
Experience has
cakes,
taught me
hand-embroidered
that behind the
bunting,
veneer
and the
of
kind of earnest
respectability,
competition one
there
only
is
finds in
always
small
human
English villages.
mischief.
The vicar had blessed the weather. The roses were in particularly smug bloom, and even the typically irritable Colonel Barrington remarked that the lemonade was quite drinkable for once. At the edge of the green, beneath a striped canvas tent, Miss Jane Marple arranged herself comfortably in a wicker chair. She had come not to compete, but to observe the gardens, the villagers, and, most interestingly, the gardeners. She always said one could learn more about a person from the plants they nurtured than from the words they spoke. Just across from her stood Mrs. Eleanor Whitcomb, recently widowed, as impeccably dressed in dove-grey silk despite the heat. There was something brittle in the way she held herself today, a faint tremor beneath her composed exterior. The villagers attributed it to grief. Her husband, Arthur Whitcomb, had died only 6 weeks prior after what the doctor called a most regrettable but natural failure of the heart.
Look out, steady on
Still,
that egg.
Miss Marple noticed the widow scanning the crowd with a kind of nervous expectancy, as though awaiting something or someone. The fete progressed with its usual mixture of gentle rivalries and earnest applause. Children raced with eggs balanced on spoons. Mrs. Pennington's Victoria sponge was triumphant yet again, and the local brass band rendered their predictable medley of wartime marches. Nothing on the surface suggested that anything was amiss, as it was just as the judges prepared to announce the winner of the prized silver trowel, an award Arthur Whitcomb had won 3 years consecutively, that the first sign of trouble appeared. A shrill cry pierced the afternoon merriment. Gasps spread through the crowd as Mrs. Abigail Carter, a plump, rosy-cheeked woman known mostly for her prodigious collection of porcelain cats, stumbled out from behind the greenhouse. Her gloved hands trembled violently as she pointed toward the potting shed. "In there!" she cried. "Oh, it's terrible. Someone fetch the police." A ripple of panic shuddered through the fete.
I saw him
Colonel
put the body
Barrington
in the
barked
shed.
orders no one listened to. The vicar muttered something about keeping calm. And Miss Marple, rising slowly from her wicker chair, felt the familiar tighten of intuition, a sense that the peaceful surface of Saint Aldwyn had just cracked to reveal something far darker beneath. They found him, Mr. Lionel Fletcher, the Garden Society treasurer, collapsed beside a rack of tools, his face pale, his spectacles askew, and one hand frozen as though reaching for the door.
As
The
Arthur
smell of
Whitcomb's
damp
heart
soil
condition.
and spilled fertilizer filled the cramped shed. "He's dead," murmured Dr. Halberd after a brief, grim inspection. "Heart failure, I'd guess. Same as poor Arthur Whitcomb." At that, a collective murmur rustled through the crowd, but Miss Marple did not murmur. She looked at the body, at the overturned stool, at the faint smear of something on the door frame, and then, very quietly, at Mrs. Whitcomb, who had gone quite ashen. For in that moment, Miss Marple saw something small, almost inconsequential, none that pricked her attention like a thorn in an otherwise tidy rose bush. Something that said, heart failure indeed. And so, the fete, once filled with cakes and laughter, became the unlikely beginning of a
He's
far
quite
more
dead, I
serious
assure you.
matter. A second
Suffocation.
sudden death, a trembling
of
widow,
death,
and a
approximately
mystery that would
midnight.
demand Miss Maple's utmost
rationing
patience,
books are missing,
insight,
Postmaster. Where did they
and
go?
delicate
I
understanding
don't know what you're
of
talking
human
about,
mischief.
Inspector. I swear I
For a
followed the
moment,
rules.
after Dr. Halberd spoke, there was only the busy, uncomfortable silence of people deliberately not looking at a dead man. Then the sound of the brass band faltered into a sorry wheeze and stopped altogether. The notes seemed to hang in the hot air, unfinished and foolish, and the crowd spilled away from the potting shed in little clumps, like sheep nudged by an unseen collie. Heart
Honestly,
failure,
the way she carries
murmured
on.
Mrs. Pennington,
It's
and
scandalous.
adjusting her hat as though
She'll
that
bring
might adjust
ruin
the
upon them
facts.
all.
Just like poor Mr. Whitcomb, it does make one wonder about the water in this village. The war did that to them, Colonel Barrington declared, with the air of a man who had already chosen his explanation. that strain on the nerves, bound to give out sooner or later. Damned efficient, the heart, until it isn't. Near the doorway of the shed, Miss Marple stood with her hands lightly folded on the handle of her handbag, eyes traveling not over the body, that she had already taken in, but over the people.
They found her down by the
They
old
were
mill stream
always
this morning.
more informative.
And she wasn't alone.
Mrs. Whitcomb had been led to a chair under the tent. Someone had brought her a glass of lemonade, which she held but did not drink. Her gloves were still on, the stitching fine and neat at the wrist, but when they trembled slightly as the murmurs reached her. "Another? Hard," she said at last, in a voice that sounded as though it had already been weeping for days. First Arthur, and now Mr. Fletcher. I suppose these things come in twos. Threes, usually, Mrs. Pennington put in helpfully, then caught the look Miss Marple
Your
turned
findings
upon her
contradict the
and
evidence
faltered.
right here. Why are you lying to me,
Well,
Doctor?
I am
not of course
lying.
that
It
one
was an
expects.
accident, I tell you.
Oh
An
dear,
accident.
I'm sorry, Eleanor. The widow's fingers tightened around the glass with a tiny, brittle crackle of ice. She said nothing more. By the potting shed, Abigail Carter was in the grip of dramatic aftershock. She had been installed on an upturned crate, fanning her flushed face with her handkerchief, while the vicar hovered about with platitudes and the young constable. Reeves.
It seems rather
They
strange,
tried to remember
Doctor,
what he
that
had been
the
told
syringe
in
simply
training about
vanished.
maintaining order at a scene
Are you
of,
suggesting
if
I took
not
it,
yet a
madam?
crime, then at least something official. Came to fetch twine, Mrs. Carter was repeating. Mrs. Willoughby said there were extra lengths in the shed, and I do so hate to see things go to waste. And I opened the door, and there he was, right there on the floor, with his eyes. Oh, I shall never forget. Yes, we've got that, Mrs. Carter, Constable Reeves said, looking
They were
overwhelmed
looking for
by the
something
combination
specific.
of death, ladies, and his own
And by the looks of
authority.
this mess,
If you'll just
they found it.
sit quietly a bit. No more sheds. He glanced helplessly at Dr. Halberd, who was pocketing his stethoscope with an air of clinical finality. "I'll sign the certificate in due course," the doctor said briskly. "No obvious trauma, no signs of struggle. He was a man of, 59, 60. Hearts fail. They do not always give warning." Miss Marple's pale blue eyes paused thoughtfully on the doctor's face, then moved to the shed door again. On the inside edge, just level with Lionel Fletcher's shoulder, there was that faint smear. Most would have taken it for earth. Many had in fact already brushed against it without notice, but to Miss Marple's eyes it seemed a shade too dark, too oily in the slanting light. Just a smudge, of course. One mustn't be melodramatic. Still, it was curious. "I suppose," she said gently, "that Mr. Fletcher had never complained to you of any particular weakness of the heart, Doctor."
This report proves
Dr.
you were here
Halberd,
that night,
who had the
Doctor. Why
tolerant
hide it? The
impatience
report
of a
is
man
irrelevant to your
frequently
inquiry,
consulted by
Inspector.
elderly
I merely
ladies on
initialed the
matters of
late delivery
digestion,
log.
glanced at her briefly. "No more than any man of his age," he replied. Which is to say, occasionally. Most people feel a twinge and assume it's the end. It almost never is, until it is. Yes, Miss Marple nodded, as though this satisfied her completely. Her knitting bag, always with her, like another limb, bumped lightly against her knee as she turned away. With the authority of the medical pronouncement, the atmosphere shifted. There was still shock, certainly, and a thrill of the morbid but proper grief. The sort that reduces people to whispers and wet handkerchiefs did not quite take hold. Mr. Fletcher had been universally considered conscientious, honest, and rather dull. No one had ever been heard to say they hated him, which, Miss Marple knew, was not the same thing as having no enemies.
I regret to disturb you at this hour,
As the
Miss
afternoon
Marple,
wore on, the
but
fate
we must
disintegrated.
discuss the segment
The
of
stalls
affair.
were packed away with subdued haste, and their prizes were distributed half-heartedly. The silver trowel, shining on its polished wooden base,
knows too
remained
much.
unclaimed on
We
the
need to
trestle table,
silence him for
a
good.
victim of circumstance like any other.
Are you sure you can do
They
it
can
quietly?
hardly give it away now, Mrs. Pennington told Mrs. Price Ridley in an urgent whisper just within Miss Marple's hearing. Not after this. Bad taste. They'll carry it over to next year, I expect. I don't see why, Mrs. Price Ridley purred. pursed
I know
her
you were
lips.
there that night.
Death comes to us
Stop
all.
lying and tell me
I
where
never
you hid the
understood the
diamonds, or you
squeamishness
will
about
not leave
continuing
this
with
tower
things.
alive.
Look at the coronation. Went on
The
perfectly
truly
well despite the
remarkable thing
influenza.
about humanity,
Though
you
of course
see,
it is different
is
when
our
it is nearly in one's own
consistent
back
repetition.
garden. Two of them now, both connected with the
Tell
Garden
me, Vicar,
Society.
did Mr. Whitcomb seem himself
Connected with
yesterday
Eleanor, if you
afternoon,
ask me,
before the
murmured
accident?
Mrs. Pennington. Not that
This
I'm
first
saying anything.
knot, Vicar, represents
Miss
the
Marple
chemist.
caught with the
And
quickness
this
of long
second
habit
thread, pulled
the way
tight, is the
Mrs. Price
connection.
Ridley's eyebrows
Perhaps
rose
there is
and
a
fell.
simpler explanation for the missing
Seeds
funds.
sown, she thought.
Simple,
They always took root
perhaps,
so
but
easily in
utterly
certain
ridiculous.
On the edge of the green, Constable Reeves had taken it upon himself to be officious. No one to leave the village until the superintendents had a look, he announced, voice cracking slightly on superintendent. Just procedure. But you heard Dr. Halberd, Colonel Barrington barked. Heart gave out. Same as Arthur Whitcomb, are we to be held hostage to every weak constitution in St. Aldwyn? It's not my decision, sir, Reeves said stubbornly. You know they've only just finished the paperwork for Mr. Whitcomb. Two sudden deaths so close together. Well, it'll be flagged, won't it? Miss
Cream and
Marple
2 sugars,
approved
just
of
as you
Reeves,
like it, Inspector.
and in a mild
Much
sort
appreciated.
of way.
Now,
Young men who clung to
about this
procedure
sudden
generally
death.
did less damage than those who relied upon their instincts, which were usually only prejudices in a better suit. By the time Miss Marple allowed
You seem
herself to be
agitated,
walked
Mr.
home
Williams.
by the vicar,
did the master
he would not
upset you
hear of her
recently?
going alone,
The only thing that
although she
upsets
privately
me is
thought she would
intruders
manage
trampling
the
my
5 minutes
hydrangeas.
quite well. St. Aldwyn was already humming with speculation. At the gate of the vicarage, they passed Mrs. Whitcomb, who was being guided into a small black motor by a man Miss Marple did not recognize. A cousin, perhaps, or a solicitor. The widow's veil was lowered now, and through the thin black mesh, her eyes seemed distant and unfocused. Poor
Shouldn't even
creature,
be here, Inspector.
the vicar murmured.
Someone tipped
This
them
must
off, Miss
recall her
Marple.
husband's death most
The
painfully.
ambush was expected.
Indeed, Miss Marple said. Though I fancy, and if one has lost a husband unexpectedly, one does not require much recalling. The vicar blinked, unused to this sharpness in her otherwise gentle tone. But Miss Marple was already smiling again, that vague, mild smile which so often led people to underestimate her. Later, in her neat little cottage on the lane, with the evening pressing soft and cool against the window panes, Miss Marple sat with her knitting and allowed her mind to
You
wander,
knew about the funds
though
missing
it
from the
never
village
wandered
treasury,
far
didn't you,
without
Whitcomb?
purpose.
That is a damnable
Two
lie,
men,
Fletcher, and
both
you know
pillars
it.
of the
I
Garden
demand you
Society,
retract that statement.
both comparatively robust as village men went, both taken within weeks of each other by what everyone was prepared, eager even to call heart failure. It was tidy, that explanation. Tidy things were always appealing.
The rain
She
couldn't
remembered
wash
Lionel
away the
Fletcher's
truth.
hand. They
These
stretched
prints
toward the
told
door
the
as if he
story,
had meant to open
leading
it and
right
changed
to the
his
doctor's
mind.
door.
The overturned stool.
I asked you where you were
The
at 10
faint,
o'clock.
unfamiliar
told you I was
tang
tending
beneath
my
the smell of
roses,
damp
and
earth
frankly,
and
Inspector,
fertilizer.
You should be looking into that
It had
slumlord down
tickled
the
at her
lane.
memory in that first moment. Now, in the quiet, it did so again. She had once spent a summer in St. Mary Mead next to a chemist's wife who dabbled in cosmetics and tonics. The same sharp note, perhaps, as in that little room where Mrs. Moffat brewed her healthful draughts and invigorating drops. Or perhaps it was only imagination. One must not, at her age, mistake imagination for perception. Still, the next morning brought a thin drizzle and an outsider to the village, a certain Inspector Graves from the county town, whose presence both alarmed and delighted St. Aldwyn in equal measure. And his arrival was witnessed from behind curtains and half-open doors. His walk from the motor to the vicarage was a parade of invisible gazes. Miss Marple, placing her flower carefully into its jar, did not hurry. She knew very well that in a small place such as this, outsiders always made their way eventually to those who knew everyone and everything, or seemed at least to have nothing better to do than pour tea and listen. And, she thought, taking up her knitting once more, there were worse occupations than listening. It was astonishing what people told you when they were convinced you were too old to make proper use of it. Inspector Graves arrived at Miss Marple's cottage just after 11. the drizzle having settled into a steady, fine rain that blurred the garden hedges into soft shapes. He knocked with a firm and businesslike rap, just enough to be authoritative without being impolite. Miss Marple, who had been expecting him in the way one expects a kettle to boil, opened the door with a mild expression of surprise. "Inspector Graves, is it? How very prompt of you. Do come in before the rain decides to worsen." He stepped inside, removing his hat and observing the room with the quiet alertness of a man accustomed to noting details. He was younger than Miss Marple had imagined, perhaps in his early 40s,
What's this, then?
with steady brown eyes and a manner that suggested he found village tragedies both inconvenient
Looks like our killer
and
dropped
faintly
something on his
suspect.
way out.
"Thank you, Miss Marple," he said. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all. I was only setting aside my knitting. It will wait." She gestured him toward the sitting room where the fire crackled with polite warmth. He sat, so his movements deliberate, as though choosing every gesture for efficiency. "I understand," he began, "that you were present at the fete yesterday when Mr.
This
Fletcher
tiny
was found."
flower holds the key, Inspector.
Miss Marple folded
It
her
only
hands over her
grows in his
skirt.
garden.
"Yes, Inspector, a very sad business. And you noticed nothing out of order?" It was asked casually, but there was something in the tone. Something that suggested he did not entirely trust the benign surface of village witnesses. Miss Marple gave a little shrug, as though half embarrassed by her own modesty. Only what anyone might have seen. Poor Mr. Fletcher lying on the floor, Dr. Halbert announcing it was his heart, Mrs. Carter in quite a state. "I'm afraid village fetes are not designed for emergencies." "No."
A curious place for a
lips
rendezvous,
tightening
wouldn't you say,
slightly.
Miss Marple?
The dead
They are
tell
not.
no tales,
But
Inspector.
two sudden deaths in
But they
one
often leave
village so
clues
close
behind.
together, well, it warrants attention. "Oh, certainly."
We interrupt this
Miss
broadcast
Marple
for a special
agreed.
bulletin from the
Though
front
people
line.
do get quite excited
situation-
at
The
the
second
idea of
victim.
coincidence. In my experience, two of anything rarely happen without some
Now
link,
I understand
social,
the motive.
emotional, or otherwise. The inspector's eyes glinted with professional curiosity. Whether the deaths may be connected? "Oh no, Inspector. I would never presume." She smiled gently. "It is only that human beings are rather repetitive creatures. When something happens once, there is nearly always someone who has either caused it or benefited from it." He studied her for a moment, probably debating whether she was merely a pleasant elderly lady or something altogether more inconvenient. At last, he cleared his throat and pulled out a small notebook. "There are a few points I'm hoping you can clarify," he said. "Firstly, did you observe Mr. Fletcher speaking with anyone unusual before his death? Anyone who seemed intent on getting him alone?"
Tell
Miss
operations to
Marple
move tonight.
considered. "No one unusual, I think. He spent most of the afternoon near the accounts table, sorting through the raffle funds. He was quite conscientious about that, always insisted on balancing things immediately." "Yes, so I've been told. And Mrs. Whitcomb, did you notice her speaking to Mr. Fletcher?" "Oh, they exchanged a few polite words earlier. I believe Mrs. Whitcomb thanked him for arranging some memorial contribution in her husband's name. She seemed very touched by it." Graves made a note. "She appeared distressed during the discovery." "Well, Inspector, widows often do appear distressed when death comes unexpectedly. It brings back unpleasant feelings." "Of course." He leaned back slightly. "Still, I've been told the Whitcombs and Mr. Fletcher had some small financial disagreements earlier in the year." "Have they indeed?" Miss Marple's voice was the picture of mild curiosity. "I suppose many people had minor financial disagreements last year. Prices were frightful. I can't imagine it amounted to more than household inconvenience." The inspector gave the faintest sigh, recognizing that this particular witness, pleasant though she was, would not be easily pressed. Miss Marple tilted her head, studying him kindly. "Inspector, may I ask, has Mr. Fletcher's body been examined more thoroughly?" He hesitated. "We've requested a post-mortem, procedural necessity." "Quite right." She nodded approvingly. "It's just that sudden deaths with no prior symptoms do lead to misunderstandings if one is not careful." Graves narrowed his eyes. "Are you suggesting something specific?" "Oh, no. she smiled. Only that Mr. Fletcher did not look entirely at peace. People who
What's
pass
this then?
quietly from heart failure often seem softer about the mouth.
Looks like our killer dropped
But
something on his
perhaps
way
that
out.
is a fanciful notion from an old lady. The inspector regarded her with a wary respect reserved for those who pretend to say very little while saying rather a lot. Before he could pursue the point, the door knocker sounded again. Brisk, urgent. Miss Marple excused herself and opened the door to find Mrs. Pennington, breathless and damp, her hat askew in a manner that suggested hurrying was not part of her
This
usual
tiny flower
habits.
holds the key, Inspector.
Miss Marple.
It only grows
Oh,
in his
Inspector,
garden.
very good. Well, I've come straight from Mrs. Carter. She is quite in a state. Says she remembered something terribly important about Mr. Fletcher and insists the inspector must hear it. Graves rose at once. Important in what way? Mrs. Pennington pressed a hand to her chest. Well, you know how Abigail talks. It's all dreadfully dramatic, but she says Mr. Fletcher told her only a few days ago that he'd received a warning. Those were his words, I believe. A warning.
A curious place for a rendezvous,
Miss
wouldn't
Marple
you say, Miss
felt,
Marple?
rather
The dead
than
tell
saw,
no
the
tales,
inspector's
Inspector.
sudden alertness.
But they often leave
A
clues
warning from
behind.
whom? He asked sharply. Oh, she didn't ask. You know how one doesn't
We interrupt
pry.
this broadcast
It's so
for a special
unseemly.
bulletin from the front line.
But he seemed troubled, she
The
said.
second victim.
Quite pale. And now, of course, she's convinced it means something dreadful.
Now I understand
Graves
the
was slipping
motive.
into his coat before she finished speaking. Miss Marple, thank you for your time. I may return with more questions. You are most welcome, she said warmly. And do be gentle with Abigail. She is terribly fond of being important, but underneath she is all nerves. The inspector and Mrs. Pennington hurried into the rain, their figures retreating into the blurred grey of the lane. Miss Marple closed the door softly, her face thoughtful. A warning. That was interesting. People did not give warnings without purpose, and people did not receive them without reacting. Mr. Fletcher had seemed entirely himself at the
The
fete.
truly
No
remarkable
hint of
thing about
impending doom
humanity,
about
you
him.
see,
A
is our
warning would have unsettled him,
consistent
unless he
repetition.
believed it to be no great threat. But then,
Tell me, Vicar, did
Why
Mr.
mention it to
Whitcomb see
Abigail
himself
Carter?
yesterday afternoon
she
before
returned
the
to her
accident?
chair, though her knitting lay forgotten for
This
the moment.
first knot, Vicar,
Instead,
represents the
She drew
chemist.
the faint memory
And
of the
this
shed
second
back
thread,
into her
pulled
mind.
tight, is the
The
connection.
overturned stool,
Perhaps
the
there is a
reaching
simpler
hand,
explanation
and that
for the
small
missing
smudge
thumbs.
on the door frame,
Simple,
darker than the
perhaps,
soil
but
around it.
utterly ridiculous.
Warnings, she reflected, were often overlooked. Sometimes because one did not understand them. Sometimes because one understood them perfectly well but wished they were not true. And sometimes, tragically, because the warning came too late. Outside, the rain continued its steady fall, as though washing the village clean. But Miss Marple knew the truth. Rain never quite reached the hidden corners where secrets lay, waiting for the right question to bring them into the light. Inspector Graves returned to the village hours later, long after the rain had soaked the hedges to a dripping green and left the
Cream
lane
and 2
shining
sugars,
like
just as
pewter
you like it,
ribbons.
Inspector.
Much
Word of his
appreciated.
visit to Mrs.
Now,
Carter had already
about this
circulated,
sudden death.
embroidered with the usual embellishments. Some said Abigail fainted dramatically into her cat-patterned cushions. Others that she had revealed a
You
list
seem
of
agitated,
suspects.
Mr. Williams.
In reality,
The master upset
she had
you
been
recently?
flustered
The
but
only thing that
coherent,
upsets me is
repeating her
intruders
account
trampling my
with
hydrangeas.
anxious earnestness, while Graves listened with the patience of a man who had interviewed many Abigail Carters in his tenure. By late afternoon, Miss Marple had just set a pot of tea on the small kitchen table when she heard a hesitant knock. It was not the brisk confidence of the inspector, nor the fluttering urgency of village gossips. This knock was tentative, almost apologetic.
I shouldn't even be here, Inspector.
When she opened the door,
Someone
she
tipped
found
them off, Miss
Eleanor
Marple.
Whitcomb standing there
The
beneath a
ambush was
dripping umbrella,
expected.
her face pale beneath the veil she had pushed back. Miss Marple, might I come in? Mrs. Whitcomb stepped inside with a sigh that seemed to deflate her entire frame. She removed her gloves slowly, as though the motion itself required deliberation. I shouldn't impose, she said, though her fingers were already curled gratefully around the warm teacup Miss Marple pressed upon her. It's just, the village feels so changed since yesterday. One can hardly step outside without
You
hearing
knew about
whispers.
the funds missing from the village treasury,
Miss
didn't you,
Marple
Whitcomb?
sat
That is a
opposite her,
damnable
knitting
lie,
untouched
Fletcher, and you
beside
know
the
it.
chair.
I demand you retract
Villagers
that
do
statement.
go rather naturally to whispering when something occurs that unsettles them. It is their way of making sense of the world. Eleanor gave a faint, tremulous smile. If only it helped. I keep thinking about Lionel. Mr. Fletcher, it seems so cruelly familiar.
The rain
First
couldn't
Arthur,
wash away the
now
truth.
him. Both
These
so
prints
sudden,
told the story,
both so
leading right to the doctor's
unexpected.
door.
Are
Miss
you entering the
Marple
raffle
watched the
later,
widow
Peggy?
over the rim
I
of her
hadn't
cup.
thought about it, Arthur.
I understand Inspector Graves spoke with you earlier.
Look at those
Yes,
dahlias.
Eleanor said,
Experience
shifting
has taught
uneasily.
me that
He
behind the
asked about
veneer
Arthur,
of respectability,
about the days before his
there is
passing.
always
I suppose he
human
thinks there
mischief.
may be a similarity. Well, Miss Marple murmured, it is the inspector's business to notice similarities. The widow's gaze drifted toward the window, though her expression seemed fixed on some inward landscape. Do you think, she whispered, that they could be
I
connected?
still don't understand why you won't
Miss
tell me where
Marple
you
did not
were.
answer directly.
But I'm starting
Did your
to think
husband
you had
ever
a
say
good
anything
reason.
that troubled him? Anything that, at the time, seemed unimportant? Eleanor hesitated so long that Miss Marple wondered whether the woman would speak at all. At last, with a shuddering breath, she said, there was something. A week before Arthur died, he received a letter. He refused to tell me what it said. A letter? Miss Marple's tone remained mild, though inwardly she felt a slight tightening of interest. Did he seem upset by it? He seemed startled,
Keep up!
as
I'm
though
winning
something
this
he
race.
had hoped to leave behind had found him again.
Look out!
And the
Steady
letter.
on that egg!
Do you still have it? Eleanor shook her head miserably. Arthur burned it in the hearth. He said it was nothing. Foolishness, he called it. But he looked so strained afterward, so withdrawn. And now Lionel. Her voice faltered. Miss Marple, what if someone is... She could not finish. Miss Marple reached across the table and patted her hand. My dear, fears are often loudest in the absence of facts. Let the inspector gather his evidence. Sir, but do tell him about the letter if you have not already. I haven't, Eleanor confessed, looking stricken. It felt disloyal somehow, and I thought it wouldn't matter. Well, Miss Marple said gently, sometimes the smallest things matter a great deal. The silence fell, a thoughtful silence, broken only by the teacups settling faintly against their saucers. When Eleanor left, walking more steadily than when she arrived, Miss Marple lingered at the window, watching the widow's grey figure move down the lane. Something in the posture suggested a woman carrying more weight than grief alone. Not for the first time, Miss Marple felt the prickling sense that beneath the genteel routine of the village, deeper currents were shifting. She was still contemplating these currents when, just before dusk, Inspector Graves returned. His coat was damp, and he looked as though he had been wrestling with facts that refused to align. Miss Marple, he said by way of greeting, I hoped I might trouble you again. Trouble? Not at all, Inspector. You look as though you could
As
use
Arthur
something warm.
Whitcomb's heart condition.
He accepted the offer of tea without his usual polite protest and sat more heavily than he had earlier. I've spoken with Mrs. Carter, he began. She insists that Mr. Fletcher told her he'd been warned. When pressed, she admitted he said only a few words. Something like, I've had a warning of sorts. When she asked what he meant, he brushed it aside. Said it was probably nonsense. Nonsense, Miss Marple repeated softly. It is a word men often use when they do not wish to appear afraid. Graves rubbed his forehead. He was a careful man, methodical, not the sort to imagine dangers. And then there's the post-mortem findings. Preliminary, but enough to muddy the waters. Oh, nothing definitive yet, the inspector admitted. It may still be the heart, but there are
He's
anomalies.
quite dead, I assure you.
Chemical traces that shouldn't
Suffocation.
be there unless he had ingested
Time of
something
death,
unusual.
approximately midnight.
Miss Marple did not look
These
surprised.
rationing books are missing,
Many
Postmaster.
things
Where
can
did
be
they go?
ingested quite
I
innocently,
don't know what you're talking about, Inspector.
especially if prepared
I
by
swear I
someone
followed
one
the
trusts.
rules.
He stared at her, then said slowly, Mrs. Whitcomb hinted her husband received a troubling letter before he died. Said nothing of the contents. She mentioned it to me as well. Miss Marple folded her hands. People often confide to those outside the official inquiry. It feels safer, I suppose. Did she say more to you? His voice sharpened
Honestly,
slightly.
the way she carries on.
Only that Arthur burned the letter.
Scandalous.
She paused
She'll
delicately.
bring ruin upon them
A curious
all.
thing, like to burn something one claims is unimportant. Graves exhaled, a sound of vexation and reluctant gratitude. You see why I came? There is something here, something that doesn't sit right. But these villagers, they speak in circles, half-truths, hints. Inspector, Miss Marple said kindly. People always speak in circles when they fear the center. He looked at her for a long moment. Mrs. Whitcomb, Mr. Fletcher, perhaps even Arthur's death.
They found her down by the
There's a
old
danger
mill
in this
stream
village,
this
Miss
morning.
Marple. I need to
And she wasn't
understand it
alone.
quickly.
Oh,
And you will,
dreadful.
she assured him. But may I suggest
I heard
something?
they moved the shipment down by the
Of
river.
course. You might consider speaking with Colonel
Madness. The
Barrington.
police patrol
Miss
that
Marple
area.
said. He's fond of dismissing things, but he has seen much, and his pride sometimes reveals things he does not intend. Graves
Stop this
arched an
nonsense
eyebrow.
at once. There is no
Colonel?
cause for alarm.
You think
I
he knows
expect
something?
every man to remain
I
calm
think,
and follow
Miss
my
Marple
instructions
replied,
precisely.
that he suspects something, and suspicion is often just unspoken knowledge waiting for a listener. The inspector rose,
Your
determination
findings
settling
contradict
back
the evidence
onto
right
his
here.
features.
Why are you lying to me,
I'll
Doctor?
pay him a
I
visit
am
this
not
evening.
lying. It was an
Do
accident,
take care,
I tell you. An
Miss
accident.
Marple said lightly, though her eyes held a gravity that made him glance back toward her. As the door closed behind him, Miss Marple eased into her chair once more. The fire had burned low. Only red embers remained, casting soft glows across the room. Warnings, letters burned in haste, chemical traces, two men gone in swift succession. And somewhere,
It
she
seems
felt
rather
quite certain,
strange, Doctor,
someone
that
who
the
believed they
syringe
had done
simply
everything
vanished.
neatly. But neatness,
Are you suggesting
Miss
I
Marple
took it,
knew,
madam?
was often the first sign that something was very wrong indeed. A Colonel Barrington lived in a brick house that looked as though it were perpetually offended by the changing of the seasons. Inspector Graves walked up the gravel path with the sense of a man bracing for battle. He had already discovered, during a brief encounter earlier that day, that the Colonel possessed the talent of answering questions with questions and opinions
They were looking
disguised
for
as
something
facts.
specific.
Miss
And by the
Marple's
looks of this
suggestion
mess,
to visit him had not
they
been
found
given
it.
lightly. She knew the Colonel well enough to predict that buried beneath his bluster lay certainties he believed too obvious to articulate. When Graves knocked, the door swung open almost at once, as though the Colonel had been stationed just behind it. Ah, the inspector. Knew you'd be round sooner or later. Barrington barked. Come in before you drown in that blasted drizzle. Ah, I've only just dried the dog. Graves followed him into a drawing room dense with brass trinkets, military paintings, and an odor of polished leather that seemed to cling to the walls. A stout spaniel thumped its tail half-heartedly before retreating beneath a side table. You'll want whiskey, the Colonel declared, not bothering to ask. Nobody asks questions without whiskey around here, unless they're the vicar, and he's no good for this sort of mess. I'll take a small one, Graves said, though his focus was entirely on the older man settling into a deep armchair. Well then, the Colonel said, pouring generously. Let's have it.
This report
You've come
proves you
because
were
of
here
Fletcher.
that night, Doctor. Why hide it?
And
The
because of
report is
Arthur
irrelevant to
Whitcomb,
your inquiry,
Graves
Inspector.
added.
I merely
Two
initialed the
sudden
late
deaths.
delivery log.
Too close together. The Colonel grunted. Close enough to smell a rat, you mean? About time someone noticed. Graves leaned forward slightly. You believe they're connected? Of course they're connected. St. Aldwyn might be small, Inspector, but it's not so full of coincidences as people like to pretend. The Colonel threw back his drink with practiced efficiency. Arthur dies after receiving some confounded letter that he pretended was nothing. Fletcher dies after muttering about a warning. They were both on the Garden Society committee, both privy to the damn account books. That caught Graves sharply. Account books. Barrington's expression softened, not into kindness, but into the satisfaction of someone proven right. Exactly. There was something off about last year's numbers. I'd mentioned it in passing to Arthur. He brushed me off.
I regret
Thought I was
to
being
disturb you
pedantic.
at this hour, Miss Marple.
But Fletcher
But we
saw
must
now.
discuss the
He was
secrecy
honest as the
affair.
day is long. He knew something didn't tally. I saw him lingering over those ledgers with the kind of frown a man wears when he finds a 20-pound note
He
where
knows
none
too
should
much.
be.
We need to
What sort of
silence him for
discrepancies?
good.
Money missing,
Are you sure
Barrington
you can
growled.
do it quietly?
Not enough for a scandal, but enough to cause discomfort if one's reputation were at stake. Fletcher mentioned it to me, offhandedly, mind you. Something about receipts he couldn't account for. Told me not to worry, that he'd sorted. The Colonel set his tumbler down
I
sharply.
know you were there that night.
And now he's
Stop
dead.
lying and tell me where you hid
Graves
the
absorbed
diamonds,
this in
or you will
silence,
not leave
the
this
pieces
tower
beginning
alive.
to shift, though not yet
The
linking
truly
cleanly.
remarkable thing about
Mismanaged
humanity,
funds
you
could be
see,
motive, certainly.
is our consistent
But would someone truly kill over a
repetition.
handful of suspicious receipts? Only if the
Tell
missing
me,
money
Vicar,
connected
did
to
Mr.
something
Whitcomb
larger.
see himself
Now,
yesterday
did Fletcher
afternoon,
tell you who else knew
before the
about this?
accident?
Graves asked. No
This
one,
first knot,
Barrington said.
Vicar, represents
But I'd
the
wager he
chemist.
spoke to Arthur before
And this
he died.
second thread, pulled
Fletcher
tight, is the
respected
connection.
the man, even when
Perhaps
Arthur
there
was
is a
being
simpler
insufferably
explanation
careful
for the
about
missing
appearances.
funds.
Graves
Simple,
scribbled a quick
perhaps,
note,
but
though his
utterly
thoughts ticked through a
ridiculous.
list of new questions. If Arthur had also known of the discrepancies, why keep quiet? Why burn the letter? Why die so suddenly afterward? The Colonel fixed the inspector with a sharp stare. You think this is accidental? Fletcher's death? Don't insult me. I'm not ruling anything out, Graves said evenly. But accusations require more than suspicion. Barrington barked a short laugh. In a village like this, suspicion's all we've got. That and old women who see more than we do. The inspector felt the faintest twitch of surprise.
Cream and 2
Miss
sugars,
Marple?
just as you like it, Inspector.
Miss Marple,
Much appreciated.
Barrington repeated, as
Now,
though stating a universal
About this
truth.
sudden death.
If she says people behave in patterns, you'd best believe it. I'd trust her observations over half the county's detectives.
You
The
seem
inspector
agitated,
did
Mr.
not
Williams.
outwardly react,
Did the master
but
upset you
inwardly
recently?
he felt the
The
prick
only
of
thing that
reluctant
upsets me is
agreement.
intruders trampling
For all
my
her gentle
hydrangeas.
manner, Miss Marple was unsettlingly precise. He finished his drink, thanked the Colonel for his time, and stepped back into the damp evening. The air smelled of wet soil and chimney smoke. He felt the pressure of time tightening around him before the post-mortem results arrived, before another whisper twisted into rumor, before someone else died. Miss Marple was
shouldn't
still
even be
awake
here,
when
Inspector.
Graves knocked on her door,
Someone tipped
though
them
she
off, Miss
opened it with
Marple.
the air of someone who had
The ambush
anticipated
was
the
expected.
sound. Inspector, she said warmly, you look as though your conversation was enlightening. Graves stepped inside, shaking droplets from his coat. Colonel Barrington told me about the account books. Ah, yes, Miss Marple said, closing the door softly. I wondered when that detail would surface. You knew? He asked sharply. I suspected. She motioned him toward the fire. Money is often at the root of unfortunate events, even small
You
amounts.
knew about the funds missing
People
from the
become
village
quite
treasury, didn't you,
unreasonable
Whitcomb?
about
That
small
is a
amounts.
damnable lie,
They feel more
Fletcher, and you
personal.
know it. I demand you
Graves
retract that
sat,
statement.
tired but alert. The Colonel says Fletcher found discrepancies, possibly spoke to Arthur about them, and Arthur, of course, received that letter, which he burned. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly as she resumed her knitting. Burning
The
is
rain
such
couldn't
decisive
wash away
action
the truth.
that people do it when
These
they wish to
prints
remove
told the
something
story,
entirely, not
leading
only
right
from
to
sight,
the doctor's
but from
door.
conscience.
I asked you where you were at 10
Inspector
o'clock.
leaned
I already told
If
you
someone
I
was
tending my
embezzling
roses,
funds
and
from the
frankly,
Garden
Inspector,
Society,
you should be looking into that
perhaps they
slumlord
feared
down
being
the lane.
discovered. That is certainly one possibility, Miss Marple agreed. But money can be a distraction. Sometimes it is not the amount taken, but the reason behind the taking that is truly dangerous. Graves frowned. Meaning? Oh, Inspector, she said lightly. How often do people steal only to avoid revealing something far worse? A secret tends to cost more than the keeping of it. Before Graves could question her further, a sudden, sharp knocking startled them both. This was no polite knock, nor a hesitant one, but the kind of pounding that comes with urgency. Miss Marple rose, her expression tightening at the edges. Now Graves opened the door and was met by a breathless, mud-splattered Constable Reeves. "Inspector," Reeves gasped. "You better come quick. It's Mrs. Willoughby." She's saying she's found something. Something in the ledger room at the village hall. In the ledger room, Graves repeated. What sort of something? Reeves swallowed. A note, sir, addressed to Mr. Fletcher, and it looks rather like a warning. Miss Marple exchanged a look with Graves, quiet, deliberate, in confirming what both already suspected. Warnings rarely came alone, and they rarely went unheeded without consequence. She retrieved her coat with a steady hand. Well, she said, her voice soft but resolute. I suppose we must see what Mr. Fletcher left behind. People often leave clues, Inspector, so even when they believe they've left none at all. The village hall was dim and echoing when they arrived, its tall windows reflecting the faint glow of street lamps outside. Constable Reeves switched on the overhead lights, which flickered tiredly to life and cast long beams across the polished wooden floor. Mrs. Willoughby stood near the door of the ledger room, wringing her hands with nervous energy, her mouth arranged into a shape ready for either confession or collapse. Oh, Inspector, I knew you'd come.
Looks like our killer dropped something on his way out.
I didn't touch anything, not after I realized what it was. I only saw the corner of it and, well, you know how I am with anything ominous. Terribly sensitive nerves. Graves nodded, already moving past her. Where's the note? In there, she whispered, pointing a trembling finger. On the table, and I was sorting the old raffle receipts. I always take them home to iron later, you see. And when I opened the drawer for the ledger,
key, Inspector.
Well, that's when I saw
it. It only grows in his garden.
Inspector Graves strode into the ledger room. Miss Marple followed at a gentler pace, letting the atmosphere of the room settle around her. It smelled faintly of ink, dust, and aging books, but beneath these familiar scents was something else. Something slightly metallic, like the tang of cold keys or a drawer left closed too long. On the central table, a folded piece of paper lay exactly where Mrs. Willoughby had described. The handwriting on the outside was unmistakably Lionel Fletcher's. His careful, neat script had always been the envy of the more hurried members
The dead
of the
tell
committee.
no tales, Inspector.
For Mr.
But they often
Fletcher,
leave clues behind.
Graves murmured, frowning. But he wrote this to himself?
We interrupt
Miss
this
Marple's
broadcast
eyes
for a special
softened in
bulletin
thought.
from the front line.
Or perhaps he
The
wrote it
situa-
intending to
second
leave it
victim.
somewhere safer and never had the chance. Graves unfolded.
Now I understand the motive.
Reeves leaned in beside him. Miss Marple observed from her usual unassuming angle, though her attention was short. The message inside was brief. 3 lines, written without flourish. Someone knows. Arthur was only the beginning. I must decide what to do before it's too late. Sign only with an initial. L. Reeves whistled softly. Well, that's clear enough, isn't it? He knew he was in danger. Inspector Graves folded the note again, jaw tightening. It's not clear whom he thought was involved. This could refer to the financial discrepancies, or something else entirely. Miss Marple's fingers brushed the edge of the table lightly. Inspector, might
Tell
I ask
operations
when the
to
last
move tonight.
committee meeting was held? 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Willoughby answered from the doorway before Graves could. Arthur had passed by then, of course, poor man. Lionel led the meeting. Oh, he was very distracted that day. Kept misplacing his spectacles, dropping things. I thought it was just grief. Grief rarely misplaces spectacles, Miss Marple said softly. But fear certainly does. Graves looked at her sharply. Do you believe he knew who sent the warning? I believe, she replied gently, that Mr. Fletcher was a cautious man, the sort who does not panic easily. But he was also a man who valued order, so if he felt something was very wrong, he would have tried to put it in order. Perhaps this note was his attempt. Mrs. Willoughby let out a little sob. Oh, Miss Marple, do you think he meant to go to the police? Possibly. Or he meant to confront someone. A dangerous decision if made alone. Inspector Graves pocketed the note carefully. We need to determine who had access to this room. Mrs. Willoughby, who else comes in here regularly? Oh, any of the committee members might, she said, fluttering her hands helplessly. Fletcher had the master key, but Arthur had one too. Colonel Barrington sometimes borrowed it to retrieve old documents. Mrs. Pennington, she insists on reorganizing the raffle books every year, though no one understands her system.
This report proves you were
Graves
here that
turned
night,
to
Doctor.
Reeves.
Why hide it?
We'll need a
Report is
list of
irrelevant
everyone
to your
who has a key
inquiry,
or has
Inspector.
been in this
I
room
merely
recently.
initialed the late delivery
Speak
log.
with the committee members tonight, if possible. Reeves nodded and hurried out, leaving Graves and Miss Marple alone with the lingering questions. The inspector rubbed the bridge of his nose. If Arthur received a threatening letter and Fletcher a warning, it suggests a progression. Someone pressuring one man, then another. Perhaps Arthur didn't respond as expected. Or perhaps, Miss Marple said quietly, Arthur responded incorrectly. Graves looked up, meaning, "Oh, Inspector," she murmured. "People who give warnings expect them to be understood. When they aren't, they tend to escalate." There was no argument in that. Graves paced the narrow room, stopping occasionally to study the shelves, the drawers, the harmless clutter of village administration. Everything ordinary, everything deceptively simple.
I regret to
Miss
disturb you at this
Marple,
hour, Miss Marple,
he said finally.
but we must
You mentioned
discuss
earlier
this
that
pregnancy
sometimes money
affair.
problems hide more dangerous secrets. Do you believe that's the case here? She considered a moment before answering. I believe that people who commit crimes rarely do so for only one reason. Money, reputations, resentment. They often tangle together in ways that make the truth difficult to unravel. But I also believe that Mr. Fletcher and Mr. Whitcomb were both men who noticed things. Quiet men are dangerous that way. Graves gave a short, humorless laugh. Quiet men, and quiet women, it seems. Miss Marple smiled faintly.
He's quite
Village
dead,
life
I assure
teaches
you.
one to listen carefully,
Suffocation.
Inspector. There
Time
is
of
so
death,
much truth spoken
approximately
in the
midnight.
spaces people leave between their
These rationing
sentences.
books are missing, Postmaster.
Before
Where did
Graves
they
could
go?
respond,
I don't know what
Mrs.
you're
Willoughby
talking about,
reappeared,
Inspector.
her face
I
white
swear
as
I followed
chalk.
the rules.
Inspector, oh, you must come quickly. Colonel Barrington has sent word. He says he has remembered something important, something he forgot to tell you earlier, but he refuses to say it over the telephone. Says he'll only speak in person. Graves exchanged a look with Miss Marple. Barrington didn't seem the forgetful type. No, she agreed, which makes it all the more intriguing that he
Honestly, the
should
way
remember
she
now.
carries on.
They left the village hall together,
She'll
the night
bring
mist
ruin
curling
upon them
around
all.
the lampposts. Miss Marple walked with steady steps, though she felt a quiet unease beneath her calm. Warnings had been issued, letters had been burned, notes tucked away like confessions. And now the colonel, proud, stubborn, impossible, claimed to have remembered something important only after news of the note began to spread. Perhaps, Miss Marple thought, the colonel had not forgotten at all. That perhaps he had hoped not to remember. And perhaps now someone else had reminded
They found her
him.
down by the old mill
Colonel
stream this
Barrington's
morning.
house loomed ahead,
And she wasn't
its
alone.
windows glowing faintly in the mist as though the light inside were wrestling with the
I
darkness.
heard they moved the shipment down by the river.
Inspector Graves quickened his stride, and Miss Marple
madness.
followed
The
at a
police
steady
patrol that
pace,
area.
noting the colonel's silhouette visible through the drawing room curtains. He was pacing, restless, agitated, like a man
This
grappling
nonsense
with
at once.
something he did
There is
not
no
wish to
cause
say,
for alarm.
yet
I
could no
expect
longer
every
keep
man
to
to remain
himself.
calm and follow my instructions
Graves
precisely.
knocked once. The colonel opened the door almost immediately, his face flushed and his manner brisk to the point of rudeness.
Your
Inspector,
findings contradict the
Miss
evidence
Marple.
right here. Why are you
He
lying to
stepped
me,
back to
Doctor?
let them
I am
in,
not lying.
closing
It was
the
an
door
accident,
sharply
I tell
behind
you,
them.
an accident.
Come along, come along. No sense letting the cold in. They entered the drawing room, to where the spaniel barely lifted its head before resuming its nap. The colonel went straight to the sideboard, sloshed whiskey into 2 glasses, then seemed to reconsider and poured a third, though he did not offer it. He drank that one himself. Right, he said, lowering the empty glass with a clatter. I remembered something I should have told you earlier, but, well, blast it. A man doesn't like to think the worst of those he's known for years. Inspector Graves stood with a patient, expectant air. What is it you remembered, Colonel? Barrington's fingers drummed on the arm of his chair. It's about Arthur Whitcomb, specifically about something he said to me shortly before he died. I dismissed it at the time, thought he was being overly dramatic, as people in their later years sometimes are. Miss Marple sat quite still, and watching him with the gentlest of expressions, the sort that coaxed secrets the way sunshine coaxes blossoms.
I saw him put the body in the shed.
Arthur told me he believed someone was watching him. Watching him? Graves repeated. Did he say who? No. Arthur was always careful not to give away more than he intended, but he mentioned, just once, that something had gone missing from his study. A document. When I asked what it was, he laughed it off and said it was probably misfiled. Miss Marple's needles paused in her lap. Did he seem genuinely unconcerned? No, Barrington admitted grudgingly.
As Arthur
He looked like a
Whitcomb's
man
heart
trying
condition.
to appear unconcerned. Foolish pride, really. Then he said something else, though I doubt it makes sense.
Are you entering the raffle later, Peggy?
Let us be
I
the
hadn't
judge of
thought
that,
about it, Arthur.
Miss Marple said kindly.
Look
Well,
at those
Barrington
dahlias.
said, and running a hand
Experience
through
has
his
taught
thinning
me
hair.
that behind
He
the
muttered that he
veneer
had
of
misread the
respectability,
warning.
there is
Then he
always
said he hoped
human
that Lyle,
mischief.
Mr. Fletcher, would be more sensible than he had been. Inspector Graves stiffened. He said that? Word for word. I assumed at the time he was speaking metaphorically. Arthur liked metaphor, especially when he'd had a brandy.
I still
Miss
don't
Marple
understand why
exchanged a
you
brief
won't tell me
glance
where you
with
were.
Graves. Mrs.
But I'm starting
Whitcomb
to
mentioned
think you had a
Arthur
good
received
reason.
a disturbing letter before his death. Barrington's eyebrows shot up. A letter? He didn't say anything about a letter. Graves pressed. Colonel, do you recall when Arthur mentioned being watched? Yes. 2 days before he died. We were walking to the green. He stopped suddenly and said, You know, Barrington, and one sees shadows even in daylight when one has misjudged things. I laughed and told him to get more sleep. I didn't realize. He trailed off, staring into the cold fireplace.
race!
And did Mr. Fletcher know of Arthur's
Look
fear?
out, steady on that egg!
Miss Marple asked. The Colonel nodded slowly. I believe so. They met privately the week Arthur died. I saw them outside the post office. Fletcher looked irritated, Arthur anxious. They didn't notice me. Fletcher walked away quickly, and Arthur stood there a moment before heading home. What day did you see them? Graves asked sharply. Tuesday. Arthur died Thursday. Miss Marple sat back, thoughtful. So Arthur received a warning he misread. Mr. Fletcher received one he understood, but too late, and both men acted troubled in their final days. Inspector Graves closed his notebook. Colonel, why didn't you mention this sooner? Barrington's jaw tightened. Because I couldn't believe anyone in this village would threaten Arthur Whitcomb, and because a man prefers to avoid admitting he overlooked something important. Miss Marple smiled gently. We all overlook things, Colonel, especially when we do not wish to see them. The Colonel let out a rough sigh and poured himself another whiskey.
He's in there.
When they left the house, the mist had thickened into a gauzy veil.
I saw him put the
The
body
lane
in
was
the
quiet
shed.
except for the distant creak of a swinging gate and the soft patter of moisture dripping from branches. Inspector Graves walked beside Miss Marple, his steps heavy. Warnings, letters, suspicions of being watched. This is growing darker than I anticipated. It often does, Miss Marple said softly. People imagine murder to be a sudden act of passion, though it is more often a slow process, resentment layered upon fear, opportunity tangled with old wounds. And money?
As
Graves
Arthur
asked.
Whitcomb's heart
Do you
condition.
believe the discrepancies led to this? Money, yes. But money is rarely the root. It is usually a branch of something older. A past offense. A secret someone feared would be uncovered. Graves frowned. Arthur burned his letter. Fletcher wrote a warning note to himself and hid it. Neither told the police. Why hide it? Miss Marple considered this carefully. Some people hide warnings because they fear ridicule. Others because they fear they have already waited too long. And some, she added quietly, because the warning implicates someone they care about, or once cared about. They walked a few steps in silence before Graves said, There's something I'm missing. Several something. I suspect, Miss Marple replied. But perhaps it would help to consider
He's
not
quite
who
dead, I
benefited
assure
from
you.
their deaths, but
Suffocation.
who was threatened by their knowledge.
Time of death, approximately
Graves
midnight.
stopped walking, meaning the
Rationing
motive wasn't
books are
profit,
missing, Postmaster.
but
Where did they
protection.
go?
I don't know
Yes,
what you're talking about,
Miss
Inspector.
Marple said simply.
I swear I followed the
Someone
rules.
is protecting something. Something neither Arthur nor Lionel had intended to uncover, but did. At that moment, a loud clatter shattered the stillness. A metal bin tipping over in the alley beside Mrs. Carter's house. Graves turned instinctively, hand to his coat, but Miss Marple held up a gentle palm. "Oh, Inspector," she said softly. "That was only a
Honestly,
fox.
the way she carries on.
But the real danger is far quieter."
Scandalous. She'll
She
bring
turned
ruin
her gaze
upon them
down the
all.
lane where the mist curled into the shape of secrets not yet spoken. "And tomorrow," Miss Marple added, "someone will begin to grow nervous. So someone will fear that Lionel Fletcher left more behind than that single note." Graves exhaled. "Because he might have. Because he almost certainly did," Miss Marple corrected. "The question now is, who fears it most, and what, precisely, did they imagine he knew?" They continued walking, the village peaceful on the surface, though beneath it, Miss
They found her
Marple
down
felt
by
the
the old mill
unmistakable
stream this morning.
stirring of agitation,
And she wasn't
like a
alone.
creature shifting in its burrow as the light grows nearer. Someone would slip soon.
I heard they moved the shipment
They
down by
always
the
did.
river.
And Miss Marple would be there,
That's
ready to
madness.
notice the
Police patrol
smallest
that
thing.
area.
The next morning broke with a pale, uncertain sunlight that seemed unsure whether it ought to shine. St. Aldwyn
Stop
lay
this
hushed
nonsense
beneath
at
it.
once. There is
Doors
no cause
slightly
for
ajar,
alarm. I
and
expect
curtains
every man
shifting
to
with the
remain
quiet
calm and
curiosity
follow my
of those who
instructions
prefer to
precisely.
observe developments rather than partake in them. Miss Marple, stepping out with her gardening basket in hand, felt at once that the
Your
village was
findings
waiting.
contradict the evidence right here.
Villagers,
Why are you
she
lying
knew,
to me, Doctor?
often held
I
their
am not
breath
lying.
when
It
secrets
was
hung
an
in the
accident, I
air.
tell you. An accident.
She had barely reached the gate when she saw Mrs. Pennington hurrying up the lane, her usual briskness sharpened by anxiety. The woman paused only long enough to catch her breath before blurting, "Miss Marple, you won't believe what's happened now." Miss Marple inclined her head gently. "People often say that, but I find most things are quite believable once explained." Mrs. Pennington shook her head in agitation.
It seems rather
"It's Mrs.
strange,
Whitcomb.
Doctor, that
She's
the
had a
ring
frightful
simply
shock.
vanished.
Inspector Graves is with her
Are you
now.
suggesting I took it, madam?
Is she injured?" "Oh no, nothing of that kind. But she received something this morning. Something quite dreadful." Miss Marple waited, not pressing, knowing Mrs. Pennington would unfold the story with more accuracy, if not rushed. "It was pushed under her door," the woman continued dramatically. "An envelope, no address, and inside, oh, Miss Marple,
They were looking
it
for
was a
something
scrap of
specific,
newspaper with a single line.
and by the looks of this
A widow
mess,
seldom remains ignorant.
they
for
found
long.
it.
She said it felt like a threat. Miss Marple's expression remained calm, but there was a perceptible shift in her eyes, a tightening of focus. Did Mrs. Whitcomb recognize the handwriting on the marking? Mrs. Pennington blinked. Handwriting? Oh, I didn't look closely. I was too horrified. People do have understandable reactions, Miss Marple murmured. "Thank you, dear. I shall walk over." When she arrived at the Whitcomb house, and Inspector Graves stood in the parlor, arms folded, looking as though he were restraining impatience. Eleanor Whitcomb sat on the sofa, hands clasped tightly around a handkerchief, as pale and brittle as frost. She looked up at Miss Marple with the relief one feels upon seeing a steady presence in a storm. "Oh, Miss Marple, this is too much. First Arthur, then Lionel, and now this." Miss Marple sat beside her, taking one of her cold hands.
This report
May I
proves
see
you
the
were
clipping?
here that night, Doctor. Why hide
Graves
it? The
handed
report
it
is
over.
irrelevant to your inquiry,
Miss
Inspector.
Marple
I
studied
merely
the
initialed the
newsprint,
late delivery
a
log.
line neatly cut from a column about bereavement etiquette. The marking beneath the sentence was a single, deliberate stroke of fountain pen ink. "Inspector Graves," she said calmly, "I assume you've asked Mrs. Whitcomb whether she has disposed of anything her husband left behind. Letters, documents, nice account books, anything someone might fear she still possesses." Graves cast a brief, guarded look at the widow. "I have, but she insists she kept nothing. Arthur was meticulous about destroying what he didn't want preserved. And yet, Miss Marple said gently, someone believes she knows something, or will know something. Mrs. Whitcomb shuddered. I don't know anything. Arthur kept things from me. He always said it was to protect me. But now, I feel as though I'm wandering through a fog, hearing footsteps behind me.
I regret to disturb you at this hour, Miss Marple.
Miss Marple said kindly.
But we must discuss
But clarity will
the
come.
affair.
Graves shifted, impatient but listening. Mrs. Whitcomb did say something useful this morning about the letter Arthur burned.
He knows too much.
Eleanor's voice
We need to
trembled.
silence him
I
for
remembered
good.
a detail, a very small one,
Sure, you can
when he
do it
held the
quietly.
letter over the fire, and I saw a word at the bottom before it curled in the flame. Soon. That's all. Graves scribbled in his notebook. A threat. Likely the same person who warned Fletcher. Miss Marple's
I know
voice
you were
was
there
soft
that night.
but precise.
Stop lying and tell me where you
Or the
hid the
same
diamonds,
person
or
who
you will
wished them
not
both
leave
to
this
believe the
tower
threat came
alive.
from elsewhere.
The
Graves
truly
looked up
remarkable
sharply.
thing about
Meaning,
humanity, you see,
people who commit
is our
mischief often cast
consistent
shadows in the wrong
repetition.
direction, Miss Marple said. It
Tell me,
buys
Vicar,
time.
did Mr. Whitcomb see
Before
himself
Graves could
yesterday
question her
afternoon,
further,
before the
Mrs. Whitcomb
accident?
gasped and sat upright, a memory
This
striking her
first knot,
suddenly.
Vicar, represents the
Oh, I nearly
chemist.
forgot.
And this
Arthur
second thread,
mentioned
pulled
something else
tight,
the
is
night
the
before he
connection.
died.
Perhaps
said,
there is a
"I trusted
simpler
the wrong
explanation
person."
for the missing funds.
I thought he meant in business.
Simple, perhaps,
He'd been crossed
but
with a solicitor
utterly
recently.
ridiculous.
But now, oh, Miss Marple, what if he meant something entirely different? Miss Marple's face softened. Ah, it is possible. But he may not have realized it himself until too late. The inspector closed his notebook, resolution sharpening his posture. Mrs. Whitcomb, I'll have a constable patrol nearby for your safety. Meanwhile, Miss Marple. He turned to her, eyes narrowing slightly. You said last night that someone would begin to grow nervous. I believe you were right. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Oh, Inspector. Nervousness
Cream and
is
2
already
sugars,
spreading
just as
through
you
the
like it,
village like
Inspector.
ivy.
Much
The
appreciated.
real question is, who has the
Now,
deepest roots in this
About
matter?
this sudden death.
They left the widow resting, though she seemed hardly soothed. Outside, the air smelled faintly of damp leaves and wood smoke.
You seem
Graves
agitated,
walked
Mr.
beside
Williams.
Miss Marple toward
Did the
the main
master upset
lane,
you recently?
speaking in a
The
low
only thing that
tone.
upsets me is intruders
You
trampling
believe the
my
person
hydrangeas.
behind these warnings is someone known to them, someone close. In most villages, Inspector, unpleasantness rarely comes from strangers. Strangers are easily noticed. Graves exhaled through his nose. Then who? Miss Marple's gaze moved along the tidy row of hedges and front gardens, pausing on each house as though reading a
I
book
shouldn't
she
even
knew
be
well.
here, Inspector.
Someone who knew
Someone
both
tipped them
Arthur
off, Miss
and
Marple.
Lionel.
The ambush
Someone
was
who had reason to
expected.
fear what they discovered, or might discover. Someone who now fears that Eleanor may stumble upon the same truth. But she said she knows nothing. Yes, Miss Marple replied. And that is precisely what makes the warning curious. Graves turned to her sharply. Why? Because, she said softly, a person does not threaten someone unless they believe that person is either dangerous or on the verge of becoming so. Mrs. Whitcomb is not dangerous, so the sender
You knew about
fears
the funds
she may
missing
yet
from the
become
village
so.
treasury, didn't you, Whitcomb? That is a
They
damnable
reached the
lie,
turn where
Fletcher,
the
and you
lane
know it.
divided.
I demand
One
you
road
retract
leading
that
toward the
statement.
hall, another toward the shops. Miss Marple slowed, thoughtful. Inspector, have you considered why Mr. Fletcher wrote a warning to himself rather than leaving it with the police? I have, and I can't make sense of it. People often
The
write
rain
things
couldn't
down
wash
when
away
they
the
fear they will
truth.
forget.
These
Especially when
prints
they're
told the
anxious.
story, leading
Forget
right
what?
to the doctor's door.
She met his gaze.
I asked
Forget
you where
the
you were
truth
at
when
10
someone
o'clock.
else is trying very hard to make them doubt it.
roses, and frankly,
Graves
Inspector,
You
stared
should be
at
looking
her,
into that
frustrated.
slumlord down the lane.
Miss Marple, if you know something, anything. Oh no, Inspector, she said gently. I merely observe. And I observe that guilt, when cornered, often becomes inventive. They parted there, Graves heading toward the constable's post, Miss Marple toward her cottage. But as she walked, she noticed something out of place. A figure standing near the edge of Mrs. Carter's garden, half obscured by the hedge. The person appeared to be watching her, or watching the Whitcomb house behind her. When the figure realized she had seen them, they moved away quickly, disappearing down a side path without a word. Miss Marple paused, fingers lightly touching the latch of her garden gate. Yes, someone was nervous. Very nervous indeed. And nervous people, she knew, always made mistakes, especially when the truth was about to surface. Miss Marple paused only a moment at her gate before continuing inside, moving with the serene composure of someone going about ordinary tasks. But her mind was alert, each thought lining up precisely, like numbered stitches on a needle. Someone had been watching. She was certain of it. Tall, and perhaps from the angle of the shoulders above the hedge. Light step, swift retreat. Not the heavy-footed stride of Colonel Barrington nor the bustling clip of Mrs. Pennington. Someone younger, and someone who very much wished not to be seen. She set her basket on the kitchen table, folded her gardening gloves neatly, and allowed herself a moment to think. What did one do when a secret was close to surfacing? One tried to silence those who might reveal it. One issued warnings, hoping fear itself would succeed where persuasion failed. And when fear was not enough, one acted more desperately. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Abigail Carter standing there, twisting her damp
Looks like our
handkerchief
killer
in
dropped
anxious
something on his
knots.
way out.
Her face was blotchy from tears or nerves, or possibly a mixture of both. "Miss Marple," she whispered, "I'm frightened. I know I'm being silly, but after the fate, and now this business with Eleanor, I can't shake the feeling that something ghastly is going on." "Do come in, Abigail. Sit down. You look quite undone." Abigail stepped inside, glancing frantically toward the windows as
This
if
tiny
expecting
flower
shadows
holds
to
the
leap
key,
from them.
Inspector.
Once
It
seated,
only grows
she
in
leaned
his
forward.
garden.
I remembered something else about Mr. Fletcher, something I didn't tell the inspector. Miss Marple nodded gently, her expression open and reassuring. People often recall things in pieces. "What is it, dear?" Abigail lowered her voice. "He asked me, just before the fate began, whether I had ever known someone to be frightened of their own mistake." Miss Marple felt a quiet shift inside her. Did he explain what he meant? No, so he only said he wished he hadn't let things slide.
A curious
assumed he
place
meant
for a
the
rendezvous,
accounts.
wouldn't you say, Miss
He was
Marple?
always so
the dead
proper
tell
about
no
them.
tales, Inspector.
But now,
But they often
she
leave
shook her
clues
head
behind.
helplessly. What if it meant something else? It might, Miss
We
Marple
interrupt
said.
this broadcast for a
But
special
Mr.
bulletin
Fletcher
from
was
the
not a
front
man
lines.
given to panic.
The situation.
When
the
did he say
second
this?
victim.
Just before lunch. Oh, Miss Marple, could
Now
someone
I
have overheard
understand the
him?
motive.
Could someone know he confided in me? Possibly, Miss Marple replied. Village greens have many ears. Abigail paled. Then perhaps I shouldn't have... The poor woman dissolved into fluttering breaths. Miss Marple placed a calm hand over hers. You are perfectly safe, Abigail. No one who means harm wishes to draw attention to themselves by attacking someone so publicly acquainted with the inspector. Abigail gulped and nodded, somewhat soothed, and Miss Marple accompanied her to the door. When she had gone, Miss Marple stepped out again, scanning the lane thoughtfully. The figure she had glimpsed earlier had been standing not far from this very spot. She was still considering
Tell
whether to
operations
mention
to
it
move
to
tonight.
Inspector Graves when footsteps sounded briskly up the lane. It was the inspector himself, coat unbuttoned, expression resolute. Miss Marple, I was hoping I'd find you. You seem troubled, Inspector. I've just come from the station. We received the preliminary toxicology report on Mr. Fletcher. He hesitated only a moment. He was poisoned. Miss Marple nodded slowly as though receiving confirmation of something already half known. Not a fast-acting poison, I assume. No, something that induces cardiac symptoms.
Your
Easy to
findings
mistake for
contradict the
natural
evidence right
failure.
here. Why are you lying to me, Doctor?
I am not
she
lying.
murmured.
It was an
Then
accident,
it was
I tell
not
you.
meant
An
to look
accident.
dramatic. Just final. Graves exhaled sharply. And that means Arthur Whitcomb's death needs to be re-examined. Yes, Miss Marple said. I believe it does. He glanced toward the lane where the mist had begun to gather once more. We need to consider who had access to both men. Someone close. Someone familiar with their routines.
It seems rather strange, Doctor, that the syringe
Someone,
simply vanished.
Miss Marple added gently,
Are you
who
suggesting I
had
took
reason
it,
to
madam?
believe they were looking into something inconvenient. Graves nodded grimly. The typed records of the Garden Society accounts were altered. Fletcher must have noticed, and now I suspect Arthur saw something too, before he burned the letter. Miss Marple turned her gaze toward the distant outline of the hall. Inspector, have the handwritten ledgers been reviewed? He blinked. No,
They were
I
looking
focused
for
on the
something
typed summaries.
specific.
Why?
And by the looks of
Typed
this mess,
documents are easy to change.
they found it.
Miss Marple said. Handwritten ones less so, and Mr. Fletcher was very particular about keeping both. Graves stared at her, then swore softly. If the ledgers contradict the typed accounts, then Mr. Fletcher discovered more than a discrepancy, Miss Marple finished. He discovered a deception. Without another word, Graves motioned her to follow, and they walked swiftly to the village hall. The building felt different now, no longer merely a place of committee meetings and raffles, but the quiet repository of someone's fear. Inside, Reeves was standing guard outside the ledger room. He straightened when he saw them. Inspector, everything's as we left it. No one's been in. Graves moved immediately to the drawers, pulling out the heavy handwritten books, to flipping through pages filled with Fletcher's meticulous script. Miss Marple observed him scan several pages before he stopped abruptly. Here, Graves said. Look at this. Last year's expenses. Now compare it with the typed copy.
I regret to
Reeves
disturb you
fetched
at
the
this
typed
hour, Miss
version
Marple,
from the files.
but we
The
must
difference was
discuss
subtle.
the segments
Just a few
affair.
entries shifted. Certain totals slightly increased or decreased. But subtle discrepancies often hid substantial truths. Miss
knows
Marple
too
leaned
much.
in,
We
pointing
need to
delicately.
silence him for good.
There. That payment to the landscaping
sure
firm.
you can do it
In the typed
quietly?
version, it is marked as completed. But here, Mr. Fletcher has written query beside it. Graves turned pages faster now. And this, a cash withdrawal. Ledger says £3. Typed version says 5. Miss Marple folded her
I know
hands,
you were there that
her
night.
voice quiet.
Stop lying and tell
Someone
me where
was
you hid the
siphoning small
diamonds, or you
sums.
will not
Near
leave
enough
this
to escape
tower
suspicion,
alive.
but not enough to seem accidental.
The truly
And when Fletcher
remarkable
noticed,
thing about
they
humanity, you
panicked.
see,
Graves
is our
looked up sharply.
consistent repetition.
But this is petty theft, hardly a motive for murder.
Tell me,
Miss
Vicar, did
Marple
Mr.
gave him a
Whitcomb
small,
seem himself
pitying
yesterday
smile.
afternoon,
Oh,
before the
Inspector,
accident?
people rarely kill over what they've taken.
This first knot,
They kill over what they
Vicar,
fear will
represents
be
the
discovered.
chemist. And this
Before
second
Graves could
thread
reply,
pulled tight is the
Reeves
connection.
hurried in from the hall door.
Perhaps there is a simpler
Inspector,
explanation for the
someone's
missing
outside
funds.
asking for you. Says it's
Simple,
urgent.
perhaps, but
Who?
utterly
Reeves
ridiculous.
swallowed. Mrs. Willoughby. She entered breathlessly, face pale, apron still dusted with flour. Inspector, I've just remembered something about last year's fete. It's about the receipts, about who handled them when Mr. Fletcher was away for a few minutes. Miss Marple turned toward her, the final strands of the pattern sliding neatly into place. Mrs.? And Willoughby hesitated, wringing her hands. It was Eleanor Whitcomb. The silence that followed held more than shock. It held every whisper, every fear, every overlooked detail. Miss Marple's
Cream
eyes
and
remained
2 sugars,
gentle,
just as you
but
like
her
it,
voice
Inspector.
dipped into something far
appreciated.
more resolute.
Now,
And so,
about
she
this
murmured,
sudden death.
the final thread is tugged. And somewhere in St. Aldwyn, the person who had been watching from behind hedges would soon realize that Miss Marple had
You seem
noticed far
agitated,
more
Mr.
than
Williams.
they ever
Did
intended.
the master upset you recently?
Inspector
the only thing that
Graves
upsets me
stared
is
at Mrs.
intruders
Willoughby as
trampling
though
my
the air
hydrangeas.
itself had shifted weight. Miss Marple watched more quietly, though her knitting lay forgotten in her lap. The sign, for anyone who knew her, that something important was unfolding. Mrs. Willoughby pressed a trembling hand to her cheek. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Why would I? But Eleanor simply offered to help with the receipts. Arthur had already won the garden prize that
I
year.
shouldn't even be here,
He was
Inspector.
so pleased, and Lionel
Someone tipped
was
them
late
off, Miss
as
Marple.
usual. So
The
Eleanor
ambush was
stepped
expected.
in. She wrung her hands harder. But now with everything that's happened, I wondered if it meant something. Inspector Graves spoke slowly, with the restraint of a man forcing reason to precede reaction. Did anyone else see Mrs. Whitcomb handle the receipts?
Are you entering the raffle later,
Colonel
Peggy?
Barrington
I
did.
hadn't thought about
Mrs.
it,
Willoughby
Arthur.
whispered, but he said she was only
Look
tidying
at
the
those
table.
dahlias.
Tidy people
Experience
often
has
call
taught me
rearranging
that
helping,
behind the veneer
Miss
of
Marple said
respectability,
softly.
there
And
is
sometimes
always
helping
human
is simply a way of
mischief.
seeing what one ought not to see. There was a pause. Heavy, charged. Graves snapped his notebook shut. I need to speak with Mrs. Whitcomb immediately. Miss Marple placed a hand lightly on his sleeve, stopping him.
I still don't
Inspector,
understand why you won't
if
tell me
Eleanor
where
is
you
in
were.
danger, or if she believes
But
she
I'm
is,
starting to think you had a
we
good
must be
reason.
delicate. She may not be the culprit, but she may have seen something a year ago she did not understand. Graves hesitated. You think she's a witness? I think, Miss Marple said gently, that Arthur burned his letter not because he feared its sender, but because he feared for Eleanor. That notion struck Graves like a physical blow. Feared for her. Yes, Miss Marple said. Arthur was a proud man, a man who believed in shields, social ones, emotional ones.
I'm winning this race.
If he realized the warning related not to him but to Eleanor,
Look out,
he
steady on
might have
that
tried
egg.
to remove the danger himself. And failed, Graves said grimly. Quite. They hurried across the village, Miss Marple keeping pace with small, efficient steps. The sun had surrendered to a grey, overcast sky, pressing low upon the rooftops. Villagers peered from windows, sensing the tightening tension, though they lacked the facts to name it. When they reached the Whitcomb house, the door stood slightly ajar. Graves exchanged a sharp glance with Reeves. Stay at my side, he ordered, Miss Marple. But she was already stepping inward with the calm certainty of someone who had long ago accepted that truth often waited in rooms with open doors. The parlor was empty. A teacup lay overturned on the small table, its contents dripping slowly into the rug. Miss Marple crouched beside it, touching the damp rim with her fingertip. Still warm, she murmured. She left only moments ago. Voluntarily, Reeves whispered.
He's in there.
Graves called out. Mrs. Whitcomb? Eleanor.
I saw him put the
No
body in the
answer.
shed.
Only the faint creak of the house settling. Miss Marple rose, her gaze scanning the room with delicate precision. A shawl missing from the hook, walking shoes gone, gloves taken but hat left behind, and on the writing desk, a single sheet of paper. Graves reached it first. It's from Eleanor. Miss Marple waited while he read aloud. Inspector, I cannot remain here waiting for the next shadow to fall. Arthur trusted the wrong person, and now Lionel has died as well.
As Arthur Whitcomb's
I must
heart
find the truth
condition.
myself before it finds me. Please forgive my departure. Eleanor Whitcomb. Reeves sputtered. She's run off. Alone? But why? Yes, Miss Marple murmured. Why indeed? Graves paced, trying to piece the letter together. If Eleanor believed she was being threatened, she should have stayed under protection. Why would she go searching for the truth herself? Miss Marple looked toward the empty fireplace where Arthur had burned his letter. Because she believes she already knows part of it. Graves frowned. What part? The part she never admitted to herself, Miss Marple said softly, but which fear has now brought to the surface. Before he could ask more, the sound of hurried footsteps burst through the quiet. Colonel Barrington arrived breathless, cheeks flushed.
He's
and
quite
cap
dead,
askew.
I assure you.
Inspector,
Suffocation.
Miss Marple. Mrs.
Time of
Carter
death,
says she saw Eleanor
approximately
heading
midnight.
toward the riverside path,
These
walking
rationing
quickly,
books are
looking
missing,
agitated.
Postmaster. Where did they go?
Graves
I don't know
stiffened.
what you're talking about,
The river?
Inspector.
Why
I swear
there?
I followed the rules.
Miss Marple answered before the colonel could catch his breath. Because that footpath leads to the old mill shed, at a very private place, and one Arthur used often when he wished to work through matters undisturbed. Graves' eyes widened. If she's meeting someone, or confronting someone, Miss Marple added, someone she trusted. The inspector wasted no time. Reeves, Notify the
Honestly,
station.
the way she carries
Colonel,
on.
come if you're able. Miss Marple.
She'll bring
But she was
ruin
already
upon them
stepping
all.
toward the lane. Naturally, Inspector. Eleanor may need a familiar face. The four of them headed quickly toward the river path, boots crunching over wet gravel, the cold breeze carrying the scent of damp reeds. The river ahead murmured with a steady, indifferent rhythm. The old mill shed stood just beyond it, long abandoned by industry, though still visited by those who preferred private conversations. As they approached, Miss Marple slowed, listening.
They found her down by the old mill stream
through the
this
open
morning.
gap in the shed wall.
And she wasn't alone.
One was Eleanor's, frantic, breathless. The other was lower,
I
controlled
heard they
with
moved the
strained
shipment down by the
patience.
river.
Graves motioned for silence,
That's madness.
then
The police
edged
patrol
forward,
that area.
Reeves at his side. Miss Marple, instead of following directly, took a small step toward the broken window where the voices carried more clearly.
Stop this nonsense at
Eleanor's
once. There
words
is
came
no
through in a
cause for
tremulous
alarm.
rush.
I expect every
I
man
didn't want to
remain
believe you
calm
were
and
involved.
follow my
Arthur
instructions
trusted
precisely.
you. I trusted you. But Lionel knew. He knew you altered those accounts. And Arthur saw the changes before he...
Your findings contradict
Before
the
he
evidence
died.
right here. Why are you lying to me,
calm,
Doctor?
cold
I am
voice
not
answered
lying.
her.
It was an
One that
accident,
sent a
I tell you,
quiet
an
ripple of
accident.
confirmation through Miss Marple. You were never meant to understand any of that, Eleanor. But you insisted on involving yourself, and now you've left me no choice. Graves sprang forward, to shouting, "Police, step away from her!" Chaos exploded in the shed. Eleanor stumbled backward as a figure whirled toward the rear exit. Reeves charged after the fleeing suspect while
It
Graves
seems rather
pulled the
strange,
shaken widow
Doctor,
to
that the
safety.
syringe simply
Colonel
vanished.
Barrington secured the main door,
Are you suggesting I
panting
took
like
it,
a man
madam?
far beyond his military prime. Miss Marple entered last, her expression grave but unsurprised. Eleanor clung to her, sobbing. It was... She could not say the name, grief and disbelief warring in her voice. Miss Marple stroked her trembling hand. Yes, my dear. It was bound to be someone you trusted. That is often the way.
They were looking for something
A
specific.
cry from outside.
And by the
Reeves,
looks of
shouting
this mess,
triumphantly, signaled
found
the
it.
suspect's capture. The footsteps were returning, accompanied by the ragged sound of a struggle subdued. Eleanor sank onto a stool, shaking violently. How did he think I wouldn't realize? The warning, the letters, Arthur's fear. Miss Marple knelt beside her, voice soft. Because, my dear, he believed you were meant to stay frightened, not informed. But fear can sharpen the mind, and he never understood that. Eleanor wept into her hands. Graves approached slowly. Miss Marple, I think we need to hear the full reasoning. How did you know? Miss Marple rose, brushing a faint dusting of sawdust from her skirt. Her eyes glimmered with both sorrow and satisfaction. I knew, she said gently, because Arthur Whitcomb made the same mistake that Lionel Fletcher made, trusting the wrong person. And once I saw who that person truly was, everything else followed naturally. And outside, the Reeves
This report
marched back
proves you were
toward
here
them with
that
the
night,
suspect
Doctor.
in
Why hide
custody.
it? The report
A
is
familiar
irrelevant to
face
your
now
inquiry,
wearing a mask
Inspector.
of fury
I merely
rather
initialed the
than
late
friendliness.
delivery log.
The truth, at last, had surfaced, and the village of St. Aldwyn would never quite look the same again. The old mill shed settled into silence again after the struggle outside, the last echoes of raised voices fading into the damp wood and weary river. Miss Marple stood with her hands gently folded, observing the scene with a sorrowful calm. It was not triumph she felt. She never did in such matters. But the familiar, melancholic sense that human nature had once again followed its most predictable, most tragic patterns. Inspector Graves returned with Reeves, who held their prisoner firmly by the arm. The suspect's coat was rumpled from the chase, their expression hard, not wild with panic, but tightly composed, and the facade cracking only at the edges. Mrs. Pennington. She glared at Miss
I
Marple
regret
with a
to
venom that
disturb you at
seemed
this
almost
hour, Miss
personal.
Marple.
You,
But we must
she
discuss
spat.
the Segmency
It's always you,
affair.
isn't it? The quiet, nosy woman who can't leave well enough alone. Miss Marple remained serenely unmoved. I'm very sorry,
knows
Mrs.
too
Pennington.
much.
I never mean to
Silence
pry.
him for good.
But the truth does have a way of insisting on being
Sure,
found.
you'll do it quietly.
Inspector Graves guided Mrs. Whitcomb to a safer distance, but Eleanor stared at the woman who had, until hours ago, been a respected neighbor, a friend. Her voice was small, raw with betrayal. Why? Why Arthur and Lionel? They never harmed you.
Stop lying and tell me where
Mrs.
you hid the
Pennington's
diamonds,
laugh was
or you will
sharp,
not leave
bitter.
this tower alive.
Harmed me. They threatened everything.
Truly remarkable
Arthur
thing
with his
about
righteous
humanity,
ledger
you
checking.
see,
Lionel
is our
with his meticulous
consistent
accounts. They
repetition.
couldn't leave one thing unnoticed. Graves
Tell me,
frowned.
Vicar, did Mr. Whitcomb see
This was
himself
all over
yesterday
money.
afternoon?
A few pounds
before the
missing from the
accident?
Garden Society. A few
This
pounds.
first knot,
Mrs.
Vicar,
Pennington
represents
snapped.
the chemist.
That money paid for my mother's
And this
care.
second thread,
for things
pulled
no one in
tight, is
this
the
village
connection.
would ever have helped me
Perhaps
with.
there is a
My
simpler
husband left
explanation
debts.
for the missing funds.
Debts everyone pretended not to know
Simple,
about while
perhaps,
they judged me
but
for
utterly
struggling.
ridiculous.
Miss Marple's eyes softened with genuine sympathy. People can be unkind, Mrs. Pennington, but murder is a permanent solution to temporary shame. They had no right, Mrs. Pennington hissed. Arthur found out by accident. He said he'd keep quiet, but he hesitated, just for a moment. That was enough. And Lionel, her voice tightened. Lionel asked questions. He looked too closely. He was going to expose it all at the next committee meeting. Eleanor covered her mouth, horrified. Arthur tried to protect me from all of this, and he never told me why he was so frightened.
Cream and 2 sugars, just as
He
you like
shouldn't
it,
have.
Inspector.
Mrs.
Much
Pennington
appreciated.
said coldly. He should
Now,
have minded his own business.
About this sudden death.
And the warnings, Inspector Graves demanded. Why terrify Mrs. Whitcomb? Why send her threats? Mrs. Pennington smirked.
You seem
though her
agitated,
eyes
Mr.
were
Williams.
burning.
Did the master
Because she
upset
started
you
asking
recently?
questions
The only thing that
after
upsets
Arthur
me is
died.
intruders trampling my
Questions Fletcher
hydrangeas.
might have answered. He had to be kept quiet. Fear is a very effective silencer. It worked on Arthur. It almost worked on Lionel. And it should have worked on her. Miss Marple stepped forward gently, her voice quiet as falling dust. But fear can also give someone clarity, Mrs. Pennington. Eleanor was frightened enough to recall things she'd overlooked, as were others. The more you pushed,
shouldn't even
the
be
more
here,
pieces
Inspector.
fell into place.
Someone tipped them off, Miss Marple.
Mrs. Pennington's composure
The ambush was
faltered,
expected.
and her shoulders sagging as though the weight she had carried had finally exceeded her strength. I wasn't trying to hurt her, only steer her away. But once Lionel collapsed in that shed, I knew it was only a matter of time. I had to frighten her more, to make her leave the village, to keep her out of the way. And instead, Miss Marple said gently, you made your own guilt louder. Inspector Graves stepped forward. Mrs. Pennington, you'll answer to the magistrates. Reeves,
You knew about the funds
take her
missing
to the
from the village
station.
treasury, didn't you, Whitcomb?
As they led the woman away, Eleanor Whitcomb turned to Miss Marple with tears standing in her eyes. How did you know it was her, Miss Marple? Truly, Miss Marple smiled faintly. My dear, it was a matter of contradictions. Mrs. Pennington claimed to dislike involvement, yet placed herself everywhere during these events. Tidying
The rain
receipts,
couldn't wash away the
comforting
truth.
widows,
These
discovering
prints
details
told the
first.
story, leading
thrives
right
on
to the
usefulness.
doctor's door.
But too much usefulness
I asked
can
you
be
where you were at
suspicious.
10 o'clock.
I already
And the
told you I was
warnings,
tending my roses.
Those were written
Thank
by
you,
someone who
Inspector.
You should be
understood
looking into
social
that
pressure
slumlord down
better
the
than
lane.
physical threat. Someone who weaponizes propriety. Mrs. Pennington has always been acutely aware of appearances. But the greatest clue was the accounts. Only someone who volunteers to handle every small detail could manipulate them without arousing immediate suspicion. And only someone emotionally driven would react so sharply to Mr. Fletcher's growing concerns. Eleanor nodded slowly, absorbing each point. Arthur must have realized too late. Yes, Miss Marple said softly. He tried to shield you from the truth. It is a sad fact that kindness sometimes delays clarity. Inspector Graves approached, and a measure of admiration in his expression. Miss Marple, without your insight, this case might have dragged on for weeks. She waved a hand lightly. Nonsense, Inspector. You would have found the truth soon enough. I only nudged matters along. Eleanor reached for Miss Marple's hand. I don't know how to thank you. There is no need, my dear. But do remember, One must never underestimate quiet people. They often see more than they're given credit for. The wind rustled through the mill shed, carrying away the lingering tension. The village would gossip, mourn, reevaluate friendships. It always did, but time would smooth the sharper edges and order would return. Gently, almost imperceptibly. Later, as Miss Marple walked back toward her cottage, she allowed herself a moment of private reflection. Human nature, she thought, was a fascinating tapestry, capable of tenderness and treachery, cowardice and courage, yet always predictable in its own particular way. And as she opened her garden gate and stepped into the quiet warmth of her little home, she knew with a quiet certainty that St. Aldwyn would heal. The truth had been found, and in that finding lay the beginning of peace, for now at least.
What's this then?
Miss Marple smiled to herself. There would always be more mysteries,
Looks like our
more
killer
human
dropped something on
tangles
his way
waiting to
out.
be gently unraveled. But for tonight, her kettle awaited, and her knitting, in the soft, comforting stillness of a village safe again.